Another date for your diary if you're a big boxing fan, the 1st of June, because two of the greats in the fight game, Beterbiev, Simon, and Bivol, will go head-to-head for the WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO light heavyweight titles. And on that same bill, inevitably, in Saudi Arabia, we have Matchroom against Queensberry fights. Of course, that means Eddie Hearn's Matchroom up against Frank Warren's fighters from Queensberry, like Deontay Wilder against Zhilei Zhang, Hergovich against Dubois, Ford against Ball, Richards against Hutchinson, and Williams against Shiraz. So the two promoters going head-to-head, or their fighters from each camp going head-to-head on their behalf. Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren were asked about this relationship with Saudi and what the relationship they have with the Saudis has actually done for boxing. This was Eddie first.
The rivalry has been great for British boxing. You know, it's enabled the sport to grow. And Frank, same as my old man, same as me, we like to win. And we don't like anyone else to win. And, you know, it is actually quite remarkable as we talk every week and we meet multiple times with His Excellency, that it has actually taken this long for us to work together, or even to speak. I mean, you're talking about 13 or 14 years where we never spoke. It's not good for the sport of boxing. The rivalry's good, the competition's good, but now we take it to another level with events like this.
So much has happened since October, since that first fight in October with Tyson and Ngannou, and I said it would be a game changer, and I underestimated that. It's been a double game changer. It's been nothing like this. And this is a Riyadh season original on the 1st of June. Things like this, well, I can't even remember anything like this ever happening in boxing. So I think this will be the first of, hopefully be the first of many of these encounters. And I mean, and I'm sure Eddie will want another one, you know, for a rematch to try and get his own back after we wipe the floor with him.
Ha! Simon, no matter what anybody thinks about Saudi Arabia as a country, as a sporting venue or whatever, it's remarkable what they've achieved in a short space of time.
Yeah, because they've got the economics to do it. I mean, if you're looking at it from a boxing point of view and from a fan point of view, it's absolutely a revolution that they're able to put aside the economics of what the other promoters would have done or could have done and take away that problem. And just simply say, we don't care at this moment in time whether these events are cost effective or whether we, as the funding behind this, make any money out of it. We're on a bigger journey. We want to build the infrastructure of being the dominant force in sports. And boxing is one of those sports that we want to own the principle of, because it brings tourism, it brings eyes on the prize, it's got lots of that behind it. So, of course, you've got to give it all of the respect that it deserves because these fights are being made. And with that in mind, you know, as a fight fan, you're now seeing these things. You know, what does it say about the promoters in the past that they couldn't get these fights done? What will it do in the future if the Saudis don't fancy a particular set of fights and the ecosystem has provided a financial landscape and then people don't fight unless they're fighting in Saudi? Yeah. Because the only reason, or not so much fight in Saudi, with Saudi money behind it, because we'll see a fight in Wembley this year, potentially, with Saudi money supporting it. Yeah. So I think, on the whole, for a sporting landscape, right now, the fact that in the boxing world, major fights are getting made because the Saudis are prepared to do whatever it takes economically, I think is a good thing for the fans.
I mean, well, the boxers are better be a Bivol. Yes, we'll have that every day and on a Sunday. Yeah. Deontay Wilder against Zhilei Zhang, recent loser against recent loser.
But as far as a bankable fight, I mean, you know, people said, and I would be in that camp, that Deontay Wilder was not in that ring against Joseph Parker. That does a discredit to Joseph Parker to some extent, but it wasn't the Deontay Wilder of old. People are allowed to have a bad performance, so his name is still very bankable. Zhilei Zhang is coming off the back of a defeat to Joseph Parker, so both of them are getting a huge commercial opportunity to get some Saudi money and cash out on it, and it's going to be a good fight. Then you've got Filip Hergovich, you know, for a final eliminator with Daniel Dubois for the IBF belt when it gets scattered after the Fury Usyk fight. Another great fight. You've got Nick Ball getting a world title shot against Ray Ford after the absolute disgrace of a decision that was awarded against him in his previous world title shot. And you've got Craig Rich, and you've got another one of a great up-and-coming fighter in Hamza Shiraz. Oh, okay, I've got a little bit of hump with him about what he did to Bradley Skeet, but all of these are good. It's a great card. These are all great fights. And every one of these fights you go, oh, I don't know. I don't know here. And that's what boxing should be about. It shouldn't be a formality, and that's what the accusation has been. You go to these fights, you think you know who's going to win, or in previous incarnations you do, and now you've got all of these fights going. Tell you what, if Deontay Wilder is what Deontay Wilder once was, then would he beat Zhilei Zhang? Is Hrgovic and Daniel Dubois? Daniel Dubois, is he coming now after that narrow loss to Usyk when he could have won that fight with that knockdown that wasn't scored as one? And you look at all those fights and they're great. And you know what, Frank and Eddie must
money's made it happen.
Totally.
I mean, Eddie and Frank can go on about it. It was a matter of time that we got this relationship going with His Excellency.
But someone got it. They got it. However, they did it.
There's Rob, a big fight fan. Who are they kidding? Saudi money's made them speak and get together.
That's fine. We all know that. They know that. But someone had to do that deal. Someone had to get the Saudis from noise with Skills Challenge and what was going on in the background and potentially his fight. And they got them there. Frank Warren, Eddie was there originally in fights that were there, but the commercial relationship that was really cemented was Frank with this next generation of Saudi interest. And now there's an opportunity. Now, how good it is for sport remains to be seen. And what it does to the ecosystem of sport remains to be seen. Eddie and Frank won't worry about that right now, because right now you look at the opportunities in front of you and nobody can complain. If you want to complain about it, then you're being mean-spirited about the sport. Do I think that everyone should bow and kiss their backsides? No, that doesn't sit with my personality. I don't like it. I'm not burying my head up a certain person's backside just because I can get a few quid out of them, but I'm not in that space. I'm not that commercial animal that's doing that particular deal right now.
But if you were a boxing promoter, would you do what Hearn and Warren have been doing?
I think you'd have to be commercially sensible. I don't like all the sycophancy. I don't. I'm sorry, that's my personality. But I understand why they're being that way. I don't think I could run around, referring to somebody as His Excellency all day. I'd find that something difficult to deal with. But that's me and my personality. But I think for the world of boxing, if boxing fans want to say the only thing that's got Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren in a room is money, well, no, Premier League don't fight as much as you think they might do, because the common thing that gilds everybody together is money. So there's no reason why it should be any different in boxing. And really what we should be looking at is, what is it producing for us? Fights. It's producing outcomes. It's taking away the opportunity. People can't hide.
And is this temporary or is it permanent?
Well,
do these big fights eventually come back to the O2, to Wembley?
Well, I think it would be, if it's slightly foolish, isn't it? If you believe in the fact that the ecosystem and the challenges and the uniqueness of sport that's been spawned out of countries like the UK suddenly gets taken away and dropped into one part of the world. It's always been difficult. Vegas had all the fights. Madison Square Garden had the fights. Nobody complained then. Nobody said, oh, it's outrageous, the Yanks have got all the fights. So I think it would be unfair to say, oh, it's outrageous that all the fights are going to the Middle East. But of course you need to feed the beast of interest. And if you
but they are, aren't they? Off the back of Fury Usyk, we're back out there again for this on June the 1st.
Yeah, and we'll see fights potentially in this country. We're seeing the potential making of a Joshua fight later on in the year that may well be at Wembley, that may well be fueled by Saudi money. Because they're not silly, these people. Whether you agree with the principles that everything...
Why would they do that, though? What's the benefits to them?
Because they're feeding the ecosystem. Because ultimately, they still want things to be commercially viable. In the end, the Saudis are going to put a lot of money behind things, and their principles aren't always about how much money they can make. But eventually, they don't like not to be commercially viable.
If Fury ever ends up fighting AJ, where should it be?
It depends if you're the fighter. Where do I think it should be from a moral standpoint of view? Well, the morals don't come into it. Where do I think that the fighters are putting their lives at risk going into their biggest fight, where they can get the most money? In an ideal utopian world, you'd love to think that two British fighters would be fighting in a British ring, and that ultimately the commerciality of that was there to suffice. But
what
you've got now is you'll have this sense of entitlement. I remember sitting there about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when we were being told that it was incumbent upon us as viewers to make sure that Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury got 100 million or 75 million for this fight because the price point needed to be at that. Well, it's not incumbent upon us. The scale of the fight is the scale of a fight, but you were going to pay 40, 50 pounds worth of pay-per-view money to be able to get these fighters to this level of money. And that's what Saudi will create. That's my concern about Saudi, is it creates a level of expectation of the financial returns for fights, which means that ultimately they can only happen where Saudi or Middle Eastern money wants it to happen, because the fighters will say, I'm not fighting unless I get that kind of dough.
Yeah.
But let's worry about that problem. Let's worry about that problem when we get to it. Right now, we've got a different scenario, which is fights are being made. And those fights are significant fights, and they're worthy fights of people watching. So I think right now, I think it's a good thing.
Okay, going into the final hour, it's 12 noon.
on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.